Today I have something very technologically advanced for you, because we are looking at an artificial intelligence tool again. I hope you are not tired of artificial intelligence yet. I am sometimes, but not tonight, because someone has actually released an AI tool that I always had in mind since this whole AI thing blew up. I think we would all agree that AI has pretty much figured out how to make great looking images, even though some visual artists wouldn't agree, mostly because of hands. But I heard that this problem is solved already. But yeah, it overall just looks like a solved problem to me. AI has not figured it out very nicely yet when it comes to creating full tracks from scratch. Like there was this attempt by Jukebox that kinda tried to solve this, and yeah, you can check it out on YouTube yourself. There is some pretty cool stuff going on there. Generally, I think this AI added some very creative twists to the music that you threw at it, but it also kind of fell apart after a bunch of bars in terms of sound quality, and you just couldn't use the music at all. And then there was this attempt at making tracks from AI called Music LM, and you will find the links to all this kind of stuff in the description. This one was quite okay. You can listen to the generated audio on the webpage yourself as well. I don't know if I can play them back because I'm not sure what the copyright is on these tracks, but when you are listening to them, you will notice that they sound pretty much the same over a long period of time, and there is not much variation. And I think if the developers actually had made it add more variation, then it might have had the same problem as Jukebox, where it just falls apart after a bunch of bars. So yeah, this seems to be a problem that is just all the time there in generating music from artificial intelligence structures of 2023. So one thing that I always wondered about was knowing that artificial intelligence can make interesting and creative sounds, but also knowing that it kind of falls apart when the segment of music is a little bit longer than a bunch of seconds. Why don't we just create one-shots from AI? Because that's only logical to me, you know? If short sounds sound good, then let's just create short sounds. Short sounds are very useful. And yeah, someone else had this idea, which is Audialab, and they created Deep Sampler, and it's an early alpha, so you cannot take this super seriously yet, but we will explore this in this video now. Audialab is still a pretty new developer, but they already have quite a name for their plugin Emergent Drums. It looks like this, and it can also create drum samples from scratch. I once asked them for an NFR license, but they didn't reply to that. I don't know if they didn't see it or if they just didn't want me to get something for free that costs $140. But anyway, now they have a product that I can test, and I'm very happy about that. So here you can either record something with a microphone, or you can drag in a drum sample or click on it to open some sample with the browser. So let's just start with a microphone input. Okay, now I made a sample where I kind of pretend like I'm a kick drum. Can we play that back somehow? Oh. That is the wrong microphone input. How can I change it? How can I tell this website what my microphone is? Okay, so my first suggestion to the developer would be that they kind of add some sort of section here where the user can decide what the microphone input should be, because apparently some other mic than my main microphone was selected for this. I don't know what that could even be, if the screen has or maybe it is my webcam. Yeah, it might be the microphone of my webcam. Let me test that. Yeah, that's definitely the microphone of my webcam. Okay, let's generate something, even though this microphone is crappy. So now this was a very crappy recording of me trying to be a kick drum, and we have the variation set to the lowest level. That's nice. It does sound a lot like the sample that we recorded. The AI didn't notice that I wanted it to have some low end because my input recording didn't have low end. That makes a lot of sense, but maybe it can generate samples that are more like the thing that I want to have when I'm turn up the variation to 50%. Nice hi-hat. What kind of features do I have here? I can favorite the sample, can make this the input sample, and I can download the sample. Maybe we should try to make a good hi-hat by making this the input sample. And now maybe a little bit less variation, 25%. I kind of like these two samples because they are very close to each other in terms of timbre. What is it being pronounced like?
Timbre.
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 Timbre. Okay, so this has a nice timbre. Let's make a folder for our deep sampler samples. Head 0, head 1. Should have called them open heads, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, now I want to make something more interesting, but for that I have to open the door first. Okay, so I want to stress test the sampler, so now I want to make something that doesn't have anything to do with drums, but just with vocals. So I make this a mono sample, and now I'm throwing Bitspeek at it. Okay, nice. Now I'll just copy that sometime here, so I can have some variation to choose from. Okay, I like the first one and the last one. So now I export these. Let's export them to wave. I don't know if the sampler understands FLAC, or actually let's try FLAC as well because we want to stress test it. And yeah, at some point it will have to understand FLAC if it wants to be a nice to use tool. So let's make a folder for input samples. And now we can go on checking out what our sampler is doing here. Oh, it does understand FLAC files. That is very nice. Let's try making only very subtle variations of this. Is it going to understand that this is not a drum sample? It indeed understands that, and it creates similar samples that sound cool. Nice. Okay, I like that. Please be aware that as part of our favorite sample system, we will store your input sample on our servers. Yeah, let's do that. So apparently by telling them that this is my favorite sample, they collect data to improve the algorithm, which is pretty cool. I like to be helpful in this regard. Bitspeek A. Now let's create a little bit more variation. Oh yeah, it still sounds a lot like the Bitspeek A, but now it has a lot of noise in it as well. Let's turn up the variation to 50% and see what happens. Will it just be more noise, or will there be some more surprises? Yeah, it kinda adds more variation into the noise, but the tonal part is still kind of pretty much the same. Now let's try 100% variation. Now these samples don't have anything to do with this sample anymore. This is just a hi-hat. This sounds like a tom. I'm gonna save it because I like toms. This AI has a tendency to create drum samples where at the end the noise fades back in again. I know some drum samples are like that, but it would be cool if there was a way to tell the AI that this is like an exception in drum samples. This is also a nice tom. Okay, let's make a new experiment. This time I want to give it a melody and find out if it can come up with new melodies. Let's export that. So will this tool understand what a melody is and come up with maybe a different melody that makes sense? Let's find out on the lowest variation. Okay, so it added a lot of noise again and it kept the melody the same. But I want to hear different melodies actually. So let's put up the variation to 50%. So this is still the same melody. So this AI is apparently really good at keeping the tonal qualities of a sample the way it is, which is good for drums, I guess. I mean, it is made for drums, but I just try to abuse it, and it would be interesting if I find a way to abuse it in a nice way. But I think throwing melodies at it will not be the way. Okay, let's try something different. I want to make noise. Okay, and now I want to throw echo board at it to make something interesting from the noise. Okay, let's export this sample. Let's use a little bit of variation, not too much. And I think that's already too much variation. I still wanted to get something that sounds like a, you know, like a delay with a frequency shifter in it. So let's turn down the variation again. I like that this tool normalizes the samples, so you can go into it even with a sample that is not normalized. Okay, I like this rim sound, but I don't like that it comes from this sample. Because I clearly wanted to have something that sounds metallic, you know, like a frequency shifter. And this sounds very wooden. Anyway, I will take it because it's nice. Let's come up with a new sound. Let's make a snare maybe. Bounce it out and hope that we get a nice sample. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Echo board snare. Little variation. Now will we get snares? That's the question. Does it understand that I go into it with something that has a fundamental frequency as well as a noisy part? Oh yeah, I think this time it really understood what I was going for. And this one does sound better than my input sample. My input sample, you can clearly hear that it's like just a frequency shifter doing its thing, and here it's more the noise and the tonal part is more linked with each other. It's, I don't know, it's more glued. So I definitely give this one a like and I will download it. Since this worked pretty well, let's turn up the variation and see if it still works well. Nah, that's too much. I don't like when it always comes with all these noise fragments that kinda pump in at the end again. It really does that too often, even if you turn up the variation. There is no need to always go into this kind of direction, in my opinion. So now I'm here in one of the projects of my friend's band Darian Geep, and what I want to do now is I want to cut out some drums from here, from a very specific part, which is the one in the center. Because there is a nice ride cymbal in there. My idea is I could only loop a single bar and see how it handles this as a break. Perfect loop. So how will it handle this loop on very little variation? This tool was made for one shots, so it might not work. Okay, that's pretty interesting. I finally found a way to abuse this tool in a meaningful way. Because now that I have thrown something at it that actually has a rhythm in its own, it gave me samples where two samples are in the same audio file, and these samples are very similar to each other. Just like the first two kicks in this drum loop. I like this one. And I like this one. In this one, I especially like the first kick. It has a very nice the beginning. So let's give these a like as well. And now since this worked pretty well, let's turn up the variation to 50%. That's nice. It sounds a little bit like a scratch. And now let's make it go crazy. The big question is, will it still give me 2 samples in one sample? Or will it just give me a random tom again? Okay, it forgot that it kind of wanted to give me 2 samples. I like this one. I like that it fades in. It sounds a bit like something that if you were to design this in a DAW, it would be with some sort of look ahead effect. Nice. Speaking of which, I have a good idea what we could try next. M freeform phase. It's a little bit like disperser, but it uses linear phase filters. So the phase smearing that you design in this plugin will appear before the sample hits. So let's just draw something crazy, whatever. Put it to extreme so that it really takes a lot of time and then play it back. Okay, that's nice. Now we have to give it some time here and bounce it out. And now we can really see how this is very similar to the sample that we just generated in the sampler. So now let's say we want to have more samples like this. What would the AI do? Let's go. Little variation. I gotta say, I already feel like putting something to only small amounts of variation is more fun than putting things to bigger amounts of variation, because the way it variates, it is very predictable. So if the developers want to keep this whole workflow where people can change the variation of stuff, then they should maybe give different types of variation as sliders. That will make it a little bit more interesting in my opinion. Okay, I can see how this sample sounds similar, but all of these samples kinda neglected that I wanted something that fades into the transient. Maybe I should have made it more obvious, but I don't know. Okay, so maybe let's make it more obvious actually. So let's load up freeform phase again. M freeform phase. Make some crazy stuff. And this time keep the depth high. Maybe make another instance of freeform phase and another crazy adjustment. And yeah, now it can really not be overlooked anymore by the AI that we want to have something that fades in. Generate. Okay, now it got more of this whoosh character and it sounds less like a kick. This one still sounds like a kick though. So I would say that the AI probably misunderstood what I wanted to do. Let's put the variation parameter to a very high value in order to find out if we at least get some cool samples out of that. Now interestingly, now we get samples again that have sort of a fade in. For some reason, putting the variation up is more likely to spit out samples that have this fade in, even regardless of whether the input samples have that. Maybe there is some sort of pre-processing on the input sample that tries to find where the transient is and then cuts off everything that was before. I mean, that makes a lot of sense when the input is a microphone input, but I would turn it off when the input is a sample input, because it might be that the transitional stuff is on purpose, but okay. Okay, now I got a new idea. I want to go into a project that I already finished, because projects that are already finished have the nice property that there are sounds in it that just sound good. So you can basically take these sounds and then want more sounds like that. And again, we are in my favorite project currently, which is the one of the Beatmaker challenge that I attended lately.
I am just a voice and I make a lot of noise. Listen up and let me show you.
I just want to have the word voice.
I am just a voice, 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 voice.
So let's export this.
Voice and voice, voice, voice.
Let's find out if this actually gives us a vocal sample. Huh? Okay, this time the AI just got completely confused by the input. Maybe I have to process this signal myself to make it more obvious what could be meant here. I think the reason why the AI might have been confused might be because this sample really has no dynamics at all. So maybe it just didn't understand where the start of the sample was supposed to be. So let's make it a little bit more obvious by giving this some dynamics. Yeah, that might make more sense to the AI. So let's try that. Nice. That still sounds like it says voice. Let's try to generate new samples. Yeah, okay, I like this one a little bit. Now where will this go when we are turning up the variation? Yeah, it does sound more percussive now, which makes sense for a tool that tries to be made for drums. Let's take another AI tool and combine both of them, because this one sorts samples by similarity. So let's just take some samples that are similar to each other. No, that one is not very similar. Okay, now I created a drum roll. Does it understand what a drum roll is? That is the question. It kinda doesn't. And it also doesn't sound very similar. Let's try something different. I wanna make a flame or flam or whatever that is called when the drummer plays two notes very close to each other. And also let's process it slightly. Just so that it's a little bit more exciting. What will this yield? Yeah, it did understand that I want to have a flame or flam. Is it flame or flam? I think it's flame. A flame snare rhythm thingy. So this definitely gets a like from me. Let's turn up the variation a little bit. See if it still produces usable sounds. I gotta say, going further than 50% with the variation is really experimental and it often makes no sense. Even at this point already, this doesn't sound like flames anymore. And this one sounds like a snare with a clap. So let's call this snare clap, because it's kind of nice, but it will not get a like because it's like, it doesn't have a lot to do with the input. So let's turn down the variation again. And yeah, these first values of variation, even below 20%, that's where things still make a lot of sense. So maybe I would change this slider to have a more precise range around these start values. For example, this makes a lot of sense and it gets a like, and this one also makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I got some samples here that I recorded a long time ago from energy drinks. Different brands of energy drinks sound different when you are hitting them with a wooden stick, and that's what this sample pack is about. Now I will drag out one of them into the browser, and I really like that I can just drag out of the door directly into the browser. That is a nice workflow. That's how the sample sounds. If you're wondering, Young Lean is of course not an energy drink brand, but that's just Arizona iced tea, which is technically not an energy drink, but it's still here. Gotta say, I'm a little bit disappointed here that it kind of disregarded the beautiful tonal qualities of the original can. Because this is clearly a percussive sample, but just one with a very tonal quality. So even an AI that is specialized on drums should handle something like that. Okay, let's try this sample then. More of a Foley one. It is basically how I pick up one of these cans of energy. So since that sounds a little bit more like drums, it should work. Yeah, this one maybe a little bit because it at least has 2 different peaks in here. And this, a bit of the sound character of picking something up. But it just has a completely different flavor in the noise. This is just such a pleasant type of noise. And this one sounds kinda random. So I really can't like any of these samples, unfortunately. Okay, here we have another drum roll. And this time it's more of a softer one that sounds a bit jazzy. Now that's pretty cool. It kind of disregarded the entire roll and it just concentrated on the kick and the snare at the beginning. And it gave me some variations of combinations of kick and snare that might work well. I like the first one. Now here we have a fill-in that sounds a bit like it tries to be a reggae tune, even though it isn't. Will we get more reggae type of sounds out of this? Okay, for some reason it only recognized the snare, but it created some very nice samples. Like this one. Sounds pretty solid. I like that, even though it doesn't have a lot to do with the input sample. This one's cool too. Okay, let's throw some crazy stuff at it, like this sample. Does it understand that it's sort of a Neurobass sound, or will it just create a drum sample from it? Okay, none of these samples realized that the actual sustained sound should have a tasty high end, but I still like this one. Just for what it does with the kick. Now this is a folder with Foley sounds that are recorded in the first car that I ever had. And I really like some of these sounds. So let's try the AI on some of these sounds. So this is the sound of pulling the handbrake. And as we all know, handbrake turns are the definition of a professional drift. Not quite. Now that car had a tape deck. And that was the sound of getting a tape out of the tape deck. A very important Foley sound for everyone who wants to make a remaster of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Yeah, it's not like, it doesn't sound like a tape. Okay, so here I have a very squishy sound, which appeared when I was opening the door. Let's see if it can understand the squishiness in this sound. Not quite. It kinda disregarded the high end entirely. So I think I should help it out a little bit, actually enhancing the parts of the signal that I really like. Okay, so now I created a sample that probably represents much more what I like about this sample than the sample itself. Let's see if it understands that better. No, doesn't. It doesn't. So yeah, I think this AI could understand squishy sounds in general much more. For some reason, every time I'm going into it with something squishy, it is just super confused. Okay, here I got a sample of one of these balls that you can sit on that are good for your posture. They have this very specific texture in its sound. I cannot describe it better, but you can immediately hear what kind of ball I mean when I'm playing the sample. So let's find out if we can actually generate more samples with this specific texture. Oh yeah, that worked. This one sounds a bit like it. Nice. I like this one too. What will it generate from this arpeggiator? That's kind of cool. It took the melody into account, but it created sort of rim or snare samples from that. So I gotta say, at this point I'm getting a little bit tired because it is pretty late already and I need to get out of bed early tomorrow. But while it's getting too late for this day, it is a little bit too early to have a real opinion on this technology. I think there is still a long way to go for sure, because I would like this to be able to pick up much more of the crazy stuff that I throw at it. Might it be bass lines or melodies or anything. I know that is not what it was meant for so far, and everyone who watched this video should be aware that I'm just blatantly abusing this tool to create weird stuff with weird inputs that it was not made for. I'm just doing that because, you know, with stuff like ChatGPT, where you can just ask it anything and it will react in the style that you talked to it as well, and give you an opinion to basically every topic that exists, unless it's offensive. Or AIs like Midjourney, where you can just generate entire vibes in images, whatever vibe you are having in mind, unless stuff that looks crappy. It is not good at making crappy looking stuff. You know, these kind of AIs are out there, so I kind of expect if someone makes a tool that can create one-shots, that this tool is the tool that creates all of the one-shots that can be created from AI. And I think this tool is not quite at it yet. It is a lot of fun to use though. I think a lot of people will enjoy this tool. I will as well. That is just how I see the future of this tool or tools like this. There will be tools. I don't know if it will be this one or another one that is similar. I would wish for Audialab if their tool will be the tool, because this already has a very nice workflow. I really like the design of this website. Also cool, you can scroll down and listen to the stuff that you have already favorized. So you can go back to the stuff that you did before and maybe do some more interesting stuff with that. Maybe there are a lot of use cases that I didn't even explore yet in this little test, since this is all very new to me as well. I'm very excited to find out how all this stuff will turn out for musicians and sound designers. See you next time.